Hi, hello, how are you? Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about Light of Death, brand new sophomore studio album from death metal supergroup Umbra Vitae. And when I say supergroup, I truly do mean a supergroup comprised of super talented, super cool people. On guitar and bass respectively, you have Mike McKenzie and Greg Weeks, both hailing from the Red Chord. Also on guitar, you have Sean Martin, formerly of Hatebreed, currently of Twitching Tongues. On drums, you have Chon Rice, currently a member of Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats, but I think most of you would recognize him for his work with Job for a Cowboy. And rounding out the whole thing on lead vocals is none other than one of metal's best frontmen and lyricists possibly ever, I would argue, Jacob Bannon from Converge. Their 2020 debut album, Shadow of Life, was good, but it definitely failed to live up to the expectations of this collaboration. It definitely felt a little bit overhyped. And this is partially the reason why I haven't been super duper hyped for this new album, Light of Death. The other reason being that, well, it's a supergroup, and let's be honest, supergroups have a pretty hit and miss track record. For example, the debut albums from Velvet Revolver and Audioslave, genuinely pretty cool. Kind of badass, dare I argue, in some parts. But subsequent albums and releases, not so much. No, not a fan. And maybe that kind of vibe is part of why I'm now somewhat floored by Light of Death, I concede, but nonetheless, I'm floored. This is everything I wanted and that I thought I was going to get from Shadow of Life back in 2020. It's rabid and uncompromising and very dark and expressive and totally unhinged even in certain parts. Pulling obvious influence from all of the bands that make up this band's DNA, as well as classic death metal acts like Entombed and At the Gates, and also pulling surprising influence from grindier, more modern extreme metal bands like Nails and Full of Hell, and combining all of that with the poetic, introspective, heart-wrenching lyricism that I come to expect from any Jacob Bannon-affiliated product, and also all of that wrapped in another amazing sound mix courtesy of Kurt Ballou, and I'm just floored. I mean, I'll say it again for those who need to hear it. I'm floored. This thing kicks an absurd amount of ass. You've got the opening number, Leave of Absence, which puts you in a somewhat uncomfortable mood and state of mind right away thanks to these dissonant, droning strings and soundscapes and textures, then transitioning into a full-blown metallic bombast with gritty guitar tones and pounding drums. Jacob's incredibly shrill, caterwauling vocals especially puts a chill down my spine. It's like nails on a chalkboard in the most complimentary manner possible. Then there's Belief is Obsolete, which is filled with bitter, depraved barks and lyricism, but also some really primitive, scuzzy, moshy riffs and grooves. Then there's Anti-Spirit Machine, a very crusty, beefy cut that leans the heaviest into full-blown old-school death metal worship with tons of vintage death metal guitars pounding and blasting and grinding and churning away. Love those super menacing gang vocals near the end and that very hellish and frantic over-the-top guitar solo as well. Reality in Retrograde is a fun one as well. Love its total embrace of chaotic, uncompromising, bloodthirsty grindcore. Quite a few genuine curveballs all throughout this as well. Take, for instance, Velvet Black, a very droll and melancholic number with these slow-burning passages and builds and these more atmospheric, sludgier tones and textures. Jacob even adopts this kind of moaning, gothic, baritone kind of vocal style here, and it works really well. And there are plenty of extra funky, experimental flavors and spices to be found on cuts like Cause and Effect and Nature vs. Nurture as well, the former of which takes advantage of some very rustic, organic flamenco acoustic guitars and literal falsetto jump scares, whereas the latter is a totally violent, onslaughting, metallic hardcore slugfest with random outbursts and plenty of sonic fury. And it also manages to sneak in weirdly a couple like weird, groovy, almost disco-esque beats. I don't know how they pull it off, but it works. Remarkably, even with 15 songs on the record, each of them dense and cram-packed and violent and crazy as hell, I never find myself getting like tired or overwhelmed. The record never loses steam or momentum or fury. There's no filler or fat to speak of, no duds, no dull moments, and the album even manages to wrap up in a good amount of time, clocking in at 45 minutes. Everyone is doing a really great job, but extra points to Jacob Bannon for putting in quite possibly one of the most dynamic and volatile vocal performances of his entire career. Kurt Ballew's production too, as per the norm with everything he touches, amazing. Everything is so well balanced, there's so much depth and nuance. Everything is just so well balanced, like as noisy as things get, there's still clarity to everything, and as transparent as things get, it still feels really raw and crusty and brutal. I'm feeling a very strong 4 out of 5, leaning heavily towards a 4.5 out of 5. It really is a great record. It's intelligent, it's ferocious, it's varied, it's so much of what I want and of what I look for in modern death metal today. It's fair to say that if you're not a huge fan of this modern death metal movement, this record wouldn't do much to change your mind. The more experimental spices and flavors and flares and diversions especially could prove polarizing. But as far as I'm concerned, this thing is excellent and maybe one of the best death metal albums of 2024 thus far, alongside stuff from Spectral Voice, Hideous Divinity, Job for a Cowboy. I love it. It's great. Super cool, super fun, super gnarly and scary and fucked up in the head. Very strong 4 out of 5, leaning towards a 4.5 out of 5. Definitely check this out. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I am not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what would you like to hear from me next? Thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.